Welcome to New Wave Global. I'm Rabia Mehmood. New Wave is an independent news site relying on your feedback. Please do subscribe, like, and comment on our discussions. Elon Musk, the US billionaire and ally of the US President Donald Trump, tweeted about the decade old child abuse scandal involving British Pakistani grooming gangs in the UK. And that story came back to the global news media again. To speak more about this, we have with us British investigative journalist Suddaf Chaudry. Suddaf is also a filmmaker, and her work has appeared in Al Jazeera English, Vice, BBC, and Channel 4, among others. Suddaf, welcome to New Wave again.
Thank you for having me on, Rabi.
So, first of all, of course, we will be speaking a lot about what's happening at the moment in the country, and again, the role of Elon Musk in bringing back this scandal to Twitter, scandal in quotes. But can you just give us a short background on what exactly was the report which was published in 2014, and what was this scandal, and what was the crime, and what were the findings?
This grooming scandal has been dubbed the UK's biggest child abuse scandal. It basically started in the late 80s, and in the early 90s is when reporting and documentation started. And as this issue developed, it was taken by local authorities to bring to the attention of the UK public that this was a Pakistani grooming gang that was basically targeting young white girls, especially from care homes that were part of the night trade, because a lot of these attacks were experienced at nighttime. And they dubbed this as a Pakistani grooming gang attacking girls in Rotherham, in the north of the country. And then this escalated to a national inquiry, which was called the J Report, which cost, let me just get this right, £200 million, and took 7 years to publish this report. And there were a number of actionable effects that the author of the report was really, trying to explain to the audience that were reading the report what the inner issues were. Why did this become the UK's biggest grooming scandal? The reality was, it was not just a race issue. It wasn't just Pakistani grooming gangs that were responsible for this problem. The reality was, it was police corruption, the lack of attention for Labour councillors who basically would not engage on the topic for the fear of being culturally insensitive, because they deemed that it was a Pakistan issue. When the reality was, there was no support for the victims. When victims first went to the police station or members of the law enforcement and explained that they were being groomed and that they were being abused, they were really just ignored because of their socioeconomic background, being from care homes. The police did not take these allegations seriously. So therefore, this issue escalated to such a number of victims, it became a center point for the government to actually focus upon. But the reality was, rather than getting action for victims, it just was basically dubbed into a biggest race issue in the country, involving a number of Pakistani men. But what was forgotten was, the victims weren't just white females, there was actually Pakistani origin females as well. But the reality was, they did not come forward in numbers because of the cultural sensitivity and the stigmatization in their communities. What should have been done, what the author explains, is there should have been a roundtable. The local Pakistani and other ethnic minorities should have been brought into the fold. They should have had an informed dialogue to see what could be done. The local police should have been investigated for corruption, misdemeanors, not investigating allegations as they were supposed to. Labour councillors should have been brought to Westminster and basically talked and discussed with why they were so hesitant to bring this into a more of an issue. Why were they hesitant to basically engage with the local authorities to understand why this was not being acted upon? This was a reality, and now, sadly, this scandal has been brought back to the forefront by Elon Musk attacking Jess. She is a Labour Member of Parliament. She has worked tirelessly over a number of years for victims of rape, especially in a constituency. She allocates time every Friday to talk to victims of abuse. Even in her time in opposition, she worked with a concerted effort to bring this into a mainstream. For Elon Musk to attack her and call her a rape apologist is basically just ridiculous, to be honest, based on no evidence. The fact that he is labeling this as a Pakistan issue is also incorrect, because ONS figures really explain that the main perpetrators of child sex abuse is predominantly white. He's also brought in not just disinformation, actual lies. He basically vilified Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister of England, and said that he removed reports that described this being an ethnic minority problem, which is factually incorrect. He did no such thing. So for Elon Musk to bring such a tragic situation in the UK for basically a bit of political football is unforgivable at this point. And without figures, without evidence to label it as an issue with Pakistan is just factually incorrect.
Sadaf, there's a lot to unpack here, but let's stick to Musk for now. You're saying that this is a straight up lie. It's not just disinformation, and it's political football. And it looks like he does have a bit of a bone to pick with, Keir Starmer, the Labour Party, because it's the Labour government, it's not the Conservative government. He's allied with Donald Trump, the new president of the United States, and leaders of Conservative Tory government in the UK have shown affiliation for Donald Trump and the kind of politics, the MAGA politics that they represent. With regards to Musk, it's also bizarre that he is talking about and attacking the prime minister of another country, and so that's there. How do you look at the fact that something like this, which kind of also is about the Pakistani community in the UK, and then someone with so much influence and who runs a platform can just add to the stereotyping? Not the first time that he's doing it, of a community which has been on the receiving end of racism, right? So how do you see that?
I think he basically picked an opportune moment with Jess Phillips' tweet of not pushing for another national inquiry. What she suggested was a local independent inquiry to deal with this problem. And then he basically used that and said that Jess Phillips was a rape apologist. So then it became this, it spiraled, right? And if you look at Elon Musk's tweets, even during the race riots last year, he was very, very supportive of individuals such as Tommy Robinson. And Tommy Robinson, he's done a lot in calling out the Pakistani community in regards to the grooming scandal. But the reality is this man's extremist, and he is not in any way of supportive of the victims. And the reason why he's behind bars is because of his extremist rhetoric. So I think what I personally feel from what I've looked at social media and local news cycle in England, I think Elon Musk wanted to bring the right-wing parties back into mainstream news. But it didn't actually work out, because what he wanted to do was bring Nigel Farage's Reform Party back into the centrefold by including rhetoric from Tommy Robinson. But sadly for Elon Musk, Nigel Farage, he said, unquote, "I don't want people like Tommy Robinson's thugs in Reform." So he has pushed himself away from Tommy Robinson. And it didn't work out for Elon Musk, because even many members of the Conservative Party are basically appalled by the positioning of Elon Musk by calling for the removal of the Prime Minister of the UK, which also should concern many international leaders as well, because he is basically giving us an insight to what President Trump's leadership will be like. if you have individuals that are members of the government in the United States calling for the resignation and vilifying the heads of other states, it's a very concerning point. You have to look at what is the politicking going to look like. This is a clear indication. It's based on little facts, little verification, and with no basis. So it's concerning to the fact that he's bringing it all on his media platform X. But many Pakistani members that I talked to just out of interest on this topic, when you asked me to discuss it, they said the reality is I don't even go on X anymore. And they still label it as Twitter. So the reality is the people that engage with X predominantly in the UK is a Conservative Party. If you look at analytics, they use it quite frequently. So I think he was positioning himself to bring a topic that he felt they would thank him for, but that it did not work out like that. Because I think even members such as Theresa May, who was the head of the UK Tory party during the grooming scandal, she would also be appalled by how his actions have unfolded. And the way to basically ridicule victims and bring an extremist party rhetoric to the centrefold on one of the biggest scandals in the UK is just really, I think, should be a concern for not just the United States, but other heads of states as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting you're mentioning, we're talking about Donald Trump as well and his influence and relationship
Yeah.
to the Republican Party now. And although there is a bit of a split in MAGA from what we see in the headlines, we don't know how strong that split is. If someone was, I read a headline called like there's going to be a civil war in yes, in that sort of larger movement. But last time when Donald Trump was president, there was a conservative government in the UK, and now it's going to be a Labour government. So it remains to be seen how the relationship between Starmer's Labour and Donald Trump administration will be.
Yeah, I think one of the distinguishable skills that I think Keir Starmer has, he removes from the personal to the public. He's very, very able to distinguish from that. So he will still position himself as a key ally of the United States. I think what he will deem this is as just a social media stir and not really engage with it in any further. I think what his main objectives would be in terms of aligning himself with the United States would be the economy, the bilateral relations, not to deem this political football to anything more than just that little bit of a circus that was created earlier this year. I think he will be the statesman that is required, but the response from the United States, that's still, uncertain because we don't know how he will react. Everything is unpredictable. How he was, his previous administration showed there was a lot of ups and downs and a lot of misrepresentation, disinformation. There was not much counsel on how the United States felt on many things. It was just how Trump felt. So I think in the long term, Keir Starmer has a challenge on his hands.
Yeah, also, yeah, and Keir Starmer, with regards to this inquiry on the and on into this scandal, Starmer did respond to it. And do you think there's going to be an inquiry?
That's the thing. The Conservative Party, the opposition, are pushing for a national inquiry, but the reality is the leader of the Conservative Party, she has not even engaged with the victims to understand why do we need another national inquiry. The cost and the time, it just doesn't seem like it was the most advisable approach, because the reality now is what victims require is to deliver on what the J report published, not to basically put another, couple of £100 million into something that is still, we're waiting to see how local authorities change, how the police approach victims of rape and abuse. That's really what should be the center of attention, not another inquiry. And I just don't think it's in the public's interest. as a cost exercise, it doesn't make sense when you've already had a very comprehensive report delivered. What the Labour leader should be doing is asking for local authorities to action this rather than another report. So I don't think there's been a determination of whether there will be, but in my understanding, I think there most likely there is going to be a report, a local independent report. That could be something that they look into, but I think in the public interest, another report that took 7 years, it just doesn't seem to make sense at this point.
Okay, one more question that you spoke about the figures that 80% or more than 80% of offenders are basically white as
Yeah,
per police data, and
yeah,
there is a UK police chief of child abuse offenses who on this issue, who also said that on television recently and categorically that men from Pakistani origin make up for a very small percentage of offenders. Not that that should be undermined, but still that is
yeah,
there. But then you have so many headlines in the news media, even the liberal publications, which
mhm,
are kind of like linking it and talking about it, still talking about it as a Pakistani grooming gang issue. And how that's just reinforcement of stereotypes, if not racist, straight up.
yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
I think it was basically something that the right-wing media used and battered with it, really. Because the reality was that they didn't even look at the how the split was between the victims either. What was never focused upon was it wasn't just sadly white young girls that were victims. Actually, Pakistani young girls were also victims of this grooming culture. And Pakistani victims didn't come forward as in much in numbers because of the cultural sensitivities, the stigmatization, have being stigmatized by the local community. They didn't understand these sensibilities. So basically, what the newspapers did at the time, the Telegraph and Spectator and the Daily Mail, they just went ahead because the guys that were arrested were British Pakistani taxi drivers. So then they said this is a predominantly Pakistani issue. They one of the Tory members of Parliament, I think his name is, let me just get this right, John. Is it John? Sorry, one second. John Redrick. He said that the Pakistani community is to blame because they their positioning on how females are treated is medieval. They lead a medieval lifestyle and have no assimilation. They do not integrate, and this is why they behave as they do. And that is completely inflammatory. How could a member of parliament release such a statement, right? Even if there was some basis on this, he should relate it with ONS figures, which is Office of National Statistics. You have no basis on this. All you're basing it upon is the members that were arrested in the grooming gang happen to be Pakistani. But you have to look at it from historical perspective. It didn't just start in the last decade. This grooming issue in the north of the country started in the late 80s. And it wasn't members of the Pakistani community being arrested at that point only. It was white men also being arrested. And then they had to basically quietly ignore an issue that happened in Cornwall many years back, where 30 children were abused by white men. But that was just a mere mention in the news cycle. And that was also had the same hallmarks of local authorities not being confident enough to deal with it, the victims being ignored, councils not taking it seriously. The same trajectory. But that was not brought to the public's attention because it was not a member of an ethnic minority standing as the accused. So I think it's very dictatorial the way that the international political alignment is occurring, and right-wing agendas are being pushed without factual basis, and this is the concern. And I think what more needs to be done, reality-based, is for the members of social services, the members of the police, have confidence, do your job. Don't basically scapegoat a community by your failings. This is exactly what's happened. Their failings in dealing with victims sensibly, giving them support, all of that was basically dismissed. And you got the amazing headline that Pakistani men are responsible for the biggest child scandal in the UK. What wasn't really brought to our attention was corruption, failing of victim support, you know, the reality that the local community was not brought into a cohesive dialogue on the issue. That's really the smarts behind this report. They are trying to explain that people did not have the confidence in dealing with it by basically worried about being labeled as racist. That's not the reality here. The reality was this community was scapegoated.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was very informative. It's informative for me as well because I think the world over, even in Pakistan, we understand it as a grooming scandal by Pakistani men. And like I said, like it shouldn't be undermined. And like you're mentioning that there are victims from the Pakistani community of these offenders who have not come forward because of issues in the community, and in of course in how justice is dispensed in and these cases are investigated and prosecuted. Sadaf, thank you so much for speaking with us. This was very helpful, and thanks to our viewers for watching. Khuda Hafiz.